Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about The Night House, which we've just seen in a cinema that I would have said was actually reasonably full for a horror movie at 2:30 on a Monday afternoon.
Yes, the movies are coming back. There was an audience, for sure.
Yeah, although it was in a small screen, so it felt probably fuller than it even was, but still, quite a few people. This is a psychological horror, haunted house situation, directed by David Bruckner, who did a short segment in VHS, which I think was a compilation anthology horror movie from a few years ago, and he's done a couple of other things, but I've never seen any of them. And it stars Rebecca Hall, who's an actress who I really didn't like when she first sort of showed up, but she's grown on me. Yeah. She's grown on me rather a lot over the years. So she plays this grieving, recently widowed woman living in a lakeside house in sort of New England somewhere. I don't know that we're ever given the states, but that's a region we're talking about. She's a school teacher. Her husband's just recently committed suicide. He went out on his boat on the lake and shot himself in the head. And following his death, she starts to learn about a second life he was kind of living and things he was up to and secrets that he had she never knew about. And she feels his presence in the house. So it's a very typical kind of haunted house setup, and I would say very typical kind of haunted house execution, quite frankly, and a really boring film.
I don't think it's a boring film.
Yeah.
I think it's an unsuccessful film with a great central performance. It is one of the ugliest films I've ever seen. It's, I think, one of the worst shot films I've ever seen. I mean, the whole first hour is so dark, and it's not just dark, it's grainy, so that the darkness doesn't give you that glossy pleasure that you sometimes get in film noir, right? So I mean, I think the film tries to use it in terms of meaning, because all of the grainy darkness of the film is clearly meant to symbolize an interior state of depression, but also living in this netherworld, that's partly ghostly, partly, in our world. You get the full sense of that by the last shots where you're finally like in sunlight, and the kind of the film stock or whatever it was shot on seems glossier.
Well, there's an effect been put on it, at least if it's digital.
But I absolutely hated the whole look of
it's a film that doesn't distinguish when to use its kind of shadowy dark look. So when it's setting up a scare and when she's walking through the house in the middle of the night, she's hearing things and that kind of thing, it's doing the horror movie thing. It's dark, it's shadowy, it frames her off to the side and invites you to look into empty space to anticipate what might be there, that kind of thing. That's kind of quite successful, but then it never decides not to do that, to use that look and lighting when it's not that. So in the scenes when she's in the school talking to her friend,
it still has that grainy.
It still looks like that, Schools have lights in.
And also, it's very unpleasurable to watch that graininess, actually. I was thinking it's like watching a blurry YouTube of a VHS program from 1975. It just looked thin and really ugly, and really unsatisfying. But I thought for the first hour of the film, I was reading the film metaphorically, and I thought, how interesting. This is about a woman, who's been completely in love and had what she thought was a great relationship with her husband. And he then commits suicide for reasons that are absolutely not clear to her, right? And she begins to question who this man that she was really in love with was. And, so to raise these questions, do you ever know anyone? Can you ever know anyone? Was kind of your perception of a relationship true? Was it just your own fantasy that you were projecting onto this person? Did they feel, what did they feel about you? Are our perspectives on reality so skewed that we each see what we want to see? I thought the film was raising all those questions in a really interesting way.
I'm glad. I found a lot of that really banal. I mean, and that's not. And I know that basically comes across as sound like I'm too smart for the film or whatever, but it just didn't grab me. And this was a film that I was the one who wanted to see it out of the two of us. And I remember the trailer, looking interesting, and then for the first 45, 50 minutes of the film, I was thinking, why did I think this looked interesting?
Yes, why did you?
And then, I mean, I may get the time it might be 45 minutes exactly, whatever. But then she gets the texts from her dead husband, and that's when it kind of started to liven up for me, and I thought, okay, there's something interesting going on here. And then it's when she sees the photo on the phone the next morning. She checks the phone to see if the texts are still there, and she sees the photo of a girl who looks exactly like her, like from behind in a bookstore. And I remember that from the trailer. And I remember thinking, oh yes, it's all about kind of doubling and doppelgangers, that sort of thing. And that's what I was really interested in. And as the film does more of that, and it gets into this mirror thing with this mirrored house on the other side of the lake that's exactly the same as theirs, but reversed, that he's been building. You kind of find out he's been building a version of this, but then there's also the full version, which is in the kind of nightmare dimension. That's the stuff that I was thinking, oh, this is getting quite interesting. It still didn't pay it off for me. I still think that, although I think I've kind of got an understanding of kind of A, B, C, D, what the plot is in kind of logical terms, I think I've put work into working that out that the film hasn't actually done in explaining it.
So I do think that there is a continuity between the things I found interesting, which was like this thing about, do you know, did you ever know, kind of what is reality, what is perception. And I think that continues into the doubling thing, right? Because that is also a kind of a question of knowing, is this like a kind of, because the mirror inverse, that is also another dimension or another world, is also a perspective on your world, So I think kind of, those metaphors kind of connected relatively easily. But I found the whole thing of the doubling incoherent, right? So there's another house, across the pond. Sometimes it's built, sometimes it's unfinished. There's meant to be a continuity in the design. You're told that the husband was an architect and he's been building these traps to catch spirits, right? I never fully got what the statue meant that she finds. So I think there are all these things that are just not fully fledged out or not fully worked out, or I didn't get them.
There are bits and pieces that I think I've put the work in to kind of join up together. So I think the idea is that, and there are spoilers coming up, you're told that she had a car crash when she was 17 years old, I think, and that she was dead for 4 minutes. Yes. And that's the kind of thing. The film is cliche upon cliche, and that's one of these things that you sometimes get in films like this. Flatliners had a similar thing, where you die and that invites the kind of spirits into the world, sort of thing. Like that's kind of what's going on. She met the spirit world at that point, and she said there was nothing there. Yes. And then she's told the husband, and the husband, it seems, has been doing research. That's where these books come from. Research on mazes trapping demons. And one of the things that you see in these books...
Let's just elaborate on that. So she thinks she's seen nothing, but actually the spirit who has invaded the husband has actually come back with her from death. And is trying to get the husband to kill her, to bring her back. Which actually doesn't make sense, because if there's nothing... If there's nothing, then what is the evil devil or spirit?
Well, I think this is... So this leads up to something that I think is really unsatisfying, but it's the end of this plot, right? I think... So yes, you're right. There's this thing that the husband's been whispered to by this demon-y spirit. And that's what he's trying to stop, and he realises it's after her. And so he's trying to save her by researching these traps, building this mirrored version of the house so the thing can get lost in it. That's what these books say. You see that in a close-up. One of the paragraphs explicitly kind of is about reversing... architecture. So when you get to the other side of the lake and you see this bare bones mirrored house that he's been in the middle of building, that's what that is. And at the same time you get this nightmare dimension version of it, which is the fully fleshed out one, which is shown by the demon. I think I don't know how much you're meant to kind of accept that it's just lying to her, isn't it, sort of thing. It's demon-y. It's a bit it's demon dream logic.
Demon dream logic.
Yeah, no, that's what it is.
It doesn't need to make sense.
Exactly. That's ultimately what that was. He was trying to save her, and the thing eventually drove him to suicide, drove him mad. I'm really helping the film out there by giving it that much, being generous enough to it to accept that.
No, I think the film is saying that he sacrificed himself for her, because actually without him she had nothing to fear, but actually it's not true, because the spirit is still there.
Still after her.
So,
and the spirit is pretending to be him by the end of it.
Yeah, so he's committed suicide for nothing, basically.
But when you get to the end of it, this is where the unsatisfying thing comes in, is that she's about to kill herself. She's about to give in to this demon when she's on the boat in the final scenes. And the demon says it is nothing. That's when she says to it, "You're not Owen," although it's Owen's body. "You're not Owen. What are you?" And he goes, "I'm nothing." Which is like, so the film is building up to this pun, basically. I think the whole thing was when she came back from death, she said she saw nothing. So there's nothing there. But actually this thing is, quote unquote, nothing.
Nothing, so it's a thing.
It's a pun. It's like a stupid horror movie pun. Nothing is after you, the suicide note says. Nothing is after you. And apparently it is.
Oh, yes.
Fucking ridiculous. Although, the very end, I did not anticipate, which is that she is saved. She's saved by the friend. And actually, I suppose there's a final girl element, although she's the girl the whole way through. So maybe that doesn't quite add up. But the thing about the final girl is the final girl in a horror movie is always the last person left alive, and it's always a girl. She's left alive at the end of this. She's
left alive, and she's saved by the love of her girlfriend.
Yeah.
So that's nice. But actually, I think the whole film is like a complete muddle. Because, this thing of having the husband be nothing. Again, if you're reading it metaphorically, it's such a cop-out. Because basically it says, oh, here's this man who's abusing and mutilating and killing women. But really, it's not his fault. He's got the devil inside him. Or, nothing is driving him.
And when it got to seeing the kind of torture and abuse of women, when it was first introduced, so she goes to that bookshop having tracked down where these occult books came from. And in this bookshop, she sees a girl who looks she's one of the girls from the photos that she's found on her husband's phone. So she talks to her. And she accuses her of sleeping with her husband and that he was cheating and so on. And as the conversation develops and they have another scene together, it starts to emerge that actually this girl may have been a victim of the husband. Something the husband was maybe gearing up to abuse her and eventually kind of let her go for whatever reason. But like that's an interesting development, right? That this girl is a victim, that the husband, that's part of this dark secret. That's interesting. But then it gets to the floorboards under the reverse house that he's building, and these bodies are in there. And I don't think you see the bodies enough. It's a horror film. You should be able to see some gore, for Christ's sake. It shies away from it a little bit.
It does.
But then on the other hand, I also think that when it's showing the kind of orgy of women being abused in the mirror house towards the end of the film, she's going from room to room in this house. Women are being dragged around, and so is she by the spirit and by the husband. I thought, actually, where's the pleasure in this? Like, I mean, something like that in a horror movie should be gross and grim or whatever, but it should also be pleasurable to see that kind of thing. It's part of the thrill, but there's no thrill in this for me. It's actually just nasty to see these women being tortured.
Well, I mean, I didn't find it particularly nasty because you actually don't see them being tortured very much, really. So
just the idea of it.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's so free of context. That's what it is. Because generally speaking, it's not like flat out wrong to do that, wrong to show that, wrong to talk about that in a film. But when it's so free of context, where am I latching onto this? Where am I getting the
Well, the context is ostensibly coming from the wife, right? And her realization of these things, and her realization that they might be her, or they're kind of like her, or there's a connection to her, right? So it's kind of the increasing, horrifying realization that it is about her somehow. But
I'm not sure it's sold.
No, it's not. It's not done very well. And actually, I think the other thing about the film is just the formal mechanics are just not very well worked out, right? Like, I think so much more could have been done with the house and with the space, and kind of cinema is about sculpting with light. Well, there's no sculpting here, right? Like, yeah, it looks like shit. Even the rhythms of the editing, or you could have imagined something more interesting had been done with the point of view, or there's the Von D. Curtis Hall character who lives nearby, and who appears. I mean, so much more could have been done with that character. So much more could have been done with the girlfriend. Yeah, like kind of relationship past. Yeah, like it's kind of not. Yeah, it's very thinly drawn, the whole thing, So, but I did find it more interesting than I thought I would.
When you say girlfriend, do you mean it in a romantic sense?
No. Well, it's not clear.
That's not what the film, I think, suggests at all.
Well, actually, it depends on the perspective, right? Because there's that bit where, I mean, what I was saying by girlfriend is meant like girls who are friends.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think that the character herself, the film suggests something different. Yeah, because she says, "I love you," in this, quite So, this weird way that feels like. So I think at that moment the film suggests that, at least from her perspective, there are more feelings towards the Rebecca Hall character.
It's interesting because what I thought then, you're right. It's a line that's delivered in a way that you notice it, and she kind of gears up to say it. It takes confidence to say it. And what I read into that was the Rebecca Hall character is pretty no nonsense, and she can actually be quite cruel and sharp towards people.
Yes.
So when she's just lost her husband and they go out drinking, they invite her out drinking, and it's the girlfriend and a couple of other friends, teachers at the school. They're kind of shying away from asking about the suicide and what happened, but she's goading it almost, out of them. And it's kind of cruel. And the scene actually right at the start where one of the pupils' parents comes to speak to her.
Great scene.
And she shuts her down by saying, your kid wants a B for work he hasn't done, or work that I wasn't there to hand in. Work that I wasn't there to receive. Well, here's the reason I wasn't there to receive it. And she goes into details about what happened to the husband.
Yes, that's a great scene.
So the Rebecca Hall character has this edge to her, quite a strong edge, and that I think is what the girlfriend is worried about antagonising when she gears up to say "I love you." That's what I read into that. Like,
no, I didn't
if I say this, is she going to react?
No, well, maybe. I mean, I thought it's a line that is safe enough, right? Like you could tell your girlfriend in distress, I love you, and have it just be read as I care for you. And, it could also be read as I have more intense feelings than that for you. And I think, the film leaves it open, and I think the actors' choices are quite deliberate in the way that it's expressed to invite that ambiguity. Yeah.
It's funny as well because I said to you at one point, I leant over and said the blonde girl, that's the girlfriend, is up to something in this.
Yes.
And at that point, you and I both thought that was going to be, well, she's clearly been cheating with the husband.
Yes.
But actually, maybe.
But I think that's also partly a badly plotted film, because I think a better plotted film would have created more links between all of the characters, right? There's not that many of them. I mean, I think there's basically 4, right? So, you could have had more worked out links with the Bondi Curtis Hall character and, with the workmate girlfriend. And they're just not there. They're just like kind of, they fulfill a function, but they could have had a much more complex and interesting set of interrelationships than they do at present.
Yeah, the Bondi Curtis Hall character especially is disappointing because it's clearly a thematic link that they're drawing between him and Rebecca Hall's character, which is that he's lost someone too.
Yeah.
And he has been through a grieving process, and is still going through a grieving process. But it doesn't draw anything out of that, really.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny, I came out of the film and I was thinking, why has this film had positive reviews? Which it mostly has. Because I really found it very disappointing. And I went onto the Rotten Tomatoes and I looked at a couple of reviews, and the reviews that I looked at said these same very vague things that honestly read like they just come out of the press pack.
Well, they could. They could have.
This woman has been through grief and it's expressed through the horror, and it's like, is it really? Really, is it? I mean, there's still things in the horror, even though, like I say, there is a horror logic to the things that go on in the Nightmare World, which I'm fine with, that still don't really add up. Like the girls throwing themselves off that cliff, right? Like there's a certain amount of context that you later realise that the husband has been kind of luring and sacrificing these women.
I know, but that is so stupid.
Yeah.
And that, if he's such a good guy, does he think it's morally and ethically sufficient to kill someone else rather than your wife? To kill these other innocent women. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Or
he was driven to it, or whatever.
And then generically, you see, just to finish my thought on the Bondi Curtis Hall character, generically, in horror films, you would have had the caretaker of the mansion, right? Yeah, or people whom this character kind of echoes. Yeah, he's also got a house in the woods. Yeah, but that caretaker, say, would have had relationship with all of the people in the haunted house, or this is just. I don't even understand what the role is about, really. Do
you know what I think? I was worried when he showed up that he was going to be the mystic black dude that these films sometimes have.
Yes, exactly.
And, which is a thing that Spike Lee, I think, has spoken out about years ago. He talked about this as a trope, the black guy with wisdom and knowledge, and he's there to help the white people. And I think the film is desperate not to do that. It doesn't give him any particular knowledge. He's just a friend. But then doesn't actually do anything else with it.
Yeah. I was afraid he would be the killer as well, because that was the other potential in the character. And I got, oh God, I hope the film doesn't go there, right? It's so racist. So it didn't go there, but it didn't do much else.
Yeah.
So, and it's a shame because he's very charismatic. I really like him as an actor and as a presence. So he's completely wasted in this. Yeah. So let's wrap it up. I mean, we can only say so much about the film is not deserving of our attention.
It could have been really good. There was obviously a reason I wanted to see it from the trailer, but I think all that good stuff that was in the trailer is all the good stuff that was in the film. And there's really not a lot left.
It's an extraordinary performance by Rebecca Hall. She is the reason to see the film, actually. I think she's absolutely great in it.
Yeah, she's good.
She's better than good. She's great.
I mean, we're not talking Toni Collette in Hereditary here. Like, that was horror movie greatness.
Well, I think this is pretty horror movie greatness, actually. I mean, I think it's an extraordinary performance. She runs the whole gamut of emotion. She's not afraid to be harsh and unlikable. I think it's brilliant. The scene with the mother in the schoolroom is absolutely superb.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
And she makes, I mean, whatever value the film has, it has due to her, I think.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a great starring performance. Anyway, on that note, do we recommend it to people? I recommend it.
No.
Yeah, you rarely see acting like that.
It might not be the worst 2 hours I spend in the cinema this week, because we're going to see...
Respect will be hugely enjoyable.
Respect is half an hour plus longer than this.
The film might be shit, but I bet you it's going to be more enjoyable than this one.
It's going to have better songs.
It's going to have better songs and better costumes.
And hopefully some lights. But apart from that...
Yes, and it will be lit.
But, I suppose I don't regret seeing this, because what else would I have done with those 2 hours? I just sat at home and had 14 wanks.
On that note, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.